So for this assignment, we were tasked with finding an activity to incorporate into our lesson plan. We were given free reign into what age group, that grade level that I could work with. The one that I decided to go with was rounding to the tens and 100 spots. My activity itself is actually third grade level, but it's all around. It can be used at multiple different levels, but the activity is typically taught during the third grade year. So for my assignment, there are three big terms to kind of focus on when you are learning to count, to round to the nearest numbers. The first big key is the place value. Place value is the value of a digit in its position. This can be the ones, tens, thousands, hundreds. There's limitless. The number as high as you can count is as high as the place value can become. The next key term is going to be rounding, because rounding is making a number simpler but keeping its value close to what it was. For in this instance, we're going to be rounding to the tens and the 100s position. It can be bigger numbers, it can be smaller numbers, whatever way you decide to round is how it can be approached. And then finally, we're going to do an open number line. An open number line is a number line that has no numbers, so students fill in the number line based on the problem they are solving. This allows them to create the different ranges that they want to work with and determine how big or how small scale they want it to be. The open number line is just a variation on the number line, which is just a number line that has digits spread out throughout to help you kind of determine where you need to be. Alright, so to begin this lesson plan, I would begin with an activity. A couple math problems kind of help the students kind of warm up, get ready for the day. It is important that they're fully awake. It depends on what period of school they're in. Typically math can be anywhere throughout the day, but it's important that their brains are warmed up and they're not kind of in a lull position. The math problems could be like counting to 100 by tens. This is a simple thing to kind of get them used to the rounding to between 0 and 10, and then also rounding from 0 to 100, kind of get them used to the variations and the different positions that they'll be found in. Also, I can get them to count to 10 by ones. By ones can be however big you want, because again, if you're rounding to the tens position, it can be kind of any set numbers. When I have kids name number off, I'm going to have them do it as a group. That way it can kind of promote it as a choral reading style. I don't want them to feel isolated, but I want them to allow them to hear others. So if they're struggling, they can kind of get a working sense of how others see it. It is important that they're comfortable. They don't want to feel like they're being isolated and picked on because they don't necessarily have the thing down. They can have learning disorders. They can have many different things. They might not even just be comfortable with the subject. Just needs a little bit more time. All in all, I think choral reading is good because it allows that growth. They aren't as nervous because it's not just them, and they can get the learning experience of others. Alright, so the assignment itself, the one I found online, focuses on the numbers 8, 32, and 79. It focuses on rounding to the tens positions and to the 100s position. All in all, kind of baseline, it can be any numbers. I just chose 8, 32, and 79 because those are the exact numbers it gave me on the activities website. Again, this is interchangeable, it just kind of can be used anywhere. So the first number I'm going to use is going to be the number 8. So to start off, we're going to do it to the tens. So when you're looking at the number 8, here you have your open number line. I just did 0 to 25 because it kind of gave me a nice spread. So if you're asking the student, you give them time, and they'd be like, hey, on the number line, where would the number 8 be? So you'll start off, here you've got 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, and 25. So when they're coming to figure out where to place their number, they'll scan the line and determine where it goes. So for this instance, 8 would be right there between the 5 and 10, closer to the 10 position, because it's more than halfway between 5 and 10. In this situation, you're going to ask them whether it rounds. This is the tens line, so you're going to ask them whether it rounds up to the nearest 10 or down to the lower 10. For this example, the number is higher than the 5. That is the midway point between the 0 and 10. So you're going to be able to round it up. Okay, and then the next one is going to be rounding to the hundreds position. So here's the number line. Again, a little bit more condensed because it allows the student to have a bigger variety. So again, on the number 8, you're going to give them a chance to scan the number line, kind of determine where they want to place the number, where it fits, just based on their understanding. So for in this instance, it's going to be all the way down there by the 10. Rounding to the 100, this one is, once you can visibly see it, it's a lot easier. That is kind of the benefit of a number line. It allows the student to get the visual understanding. Once they see the dot, it kind of makes it a little easier because it gives them a focal point to kind of look off. So in this instance, 8 will round down to the 0 because it is closer. It is less than 50, which is that midway ground between 0 and 100. Next number we're going to focus on is 32. So again, we have our tens line. So in this time, because it's an open number line, I can determine what numbers I want to put on it. So I decided to go with 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, and 45. Again, I just kind of kept the same number as was in the first showcase. Kind of even segmenting on the line allows it to be kind of uniform and look nicer. So when you ask them this, it can be a little bit more difficult to start off because you're not starting at 0, you're kind of choosing a different starting point. So once they are able to analyze the line and kind of look at it, they can look and determine that 32 is right there after 30. In this instance, I'm asking whether or not it will round up to 40 or down to 30. Because it is lower than the 35, which is the middle ground between 30 and 40, it would then round down. So the next one is going to be the hundreds position for 32. So again, I have the same line, 0 to 100, segmented by tens. Allow them to kind of scan the line, determine where it goes. So upon them looking, they'll notice that it goes right there above the 30. Again, ask them to look. You're looking for the midway point between 0 and 100. So the midway point on this line would be 50. And since it is lower than 50, they will then determine that it is rounding down to the 0 because it does not cross that middle threshold. Alright, so the next number we're looking at is 79. This one is the larger number. It kind of is the opposite end of the spectrum compared to 8. Start off on my tens line. The numbers I chose here are 70, 75, 80, 85, 90, 95. Again, the same number of dashes because it keeps it uniform and segmented. Again, they might struggle because it's not 0 they're starting with. They're starting at a different number that's kind of higher up. Give a moment to kind of scan and assess the line. They'll see that 79 falls right below the 80 line, really close to it. So when they're looking at this, when they're rounding up to 80 or down to 79, the thing I'm going to ask them to look for is, are they ahead of or behind the 75? So in this instance, they're above it, which means they're going to round up to the 80 mark. Okay, finally, here's my 100 lines for the number 79. Going to have them kind of scan through it, pretty similar to the other, it's the exact same as the other two before it. So they scan the line and they'll determine that the dot goes on the line right below the 80. Again, 0 to 100, the middle ground is going to be 50. So I'm going to have them keep assessing that. Since it's above the 50 mark, they're going to round up to 100. I think it's good to leave all of these up on the board at the same time because it lets them look back at the previous work. Maybe they aren't fully comprehending what they're looking at or what they're being asked. So it kind of gives them the jumping point. They'll see that they can use the 50 on the baseline every single time and notice whether it's ahead of it or it's behind it. All in all, it allows them to kind of base their understanding off of. Okay, so for closure on the activity, I decided that I wanted to kind of test them a little bit more. This will be a lot easier of an activity, more of a fun one to get them involved. So depending on the class size, I would determine the number of volunteers I would want. I would just have them raise their hand and kind of decide if they wanted to be a volunteer or not. The volunteers are going to be the ones who will answer the questions, while the rest will be what I'm calling my manipulative objects. It allows them, they're the concrete pieces that the volunteers are able to look at. I will direct the non-volunteer students to kind of get up and split into groups of their own. They can get into whatever size they want, just allow them to kind of create segmented groups that aren't uniform. I want them to be unique, different numbers that challenges the student to think. With this style, I'll probably be solely rounding based on the nearest tens because it would be a lot harder for students and younger students to kind of count 65 kids out, and that defeats the purpose of the closure activity. I want this to be something quick and easy that they can kind of run through and kind of get a feel on. Again, I feel like this is a good thing to kind of go over with the students because it's a summative assessment. It's good to kind of look back and did the student learn something? Are they able to retain it? And is it something that I need to work on more? Of course, this is volunteer based, so not every student is getting fully tested, but this is something that can be repeated. Even if a student isn't a volunteer, when they just get into the group, they are able to kind of listen to the volunteer and kind of get behind their thinking, and that will be kind of a jumping off point for them to get their own baseline learning. All in all, I like it because it's a summative assessment. Nothing too serious. I'm not going to be penalizing a student for kind of going over it. All in all, I decided on the lesson plan that this is a 10 to 15 minute activity for the lesson plan. The whole thing, the 8 through 8, 32, 79, and then my closure activity can take, I put 10 to 15 because it all depends on how much time you give the students. You don't want them to feel rushed, so you want to give them enough time to think through it. They're typically going to be, when I'm asking the actual main 8, 32, 79 activity, they're going to be on their own because I wanted to see individually how they're kind of retaining and what they know. And then the closure activity, like I said, will be kind of the more group fun-based one to get them up and moving around so they're not getting back into that lull. I want them to stay interactive. I want them to stay focused on the task. All in all, I think this would be a great lesson plan to go over with third graders because they're at that age where they want to learn and they always think it's fun to kind of get involved with the class. So thank you.